We're good to go? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Hastings on Hudson Board of Education meeting. Today is November 27th. I don't know if you all have agendas, but we're going to start. We're going to be a little out of order because we have some joyful events to start with, and those are our tenure appointments. So I'll turn it over to our Superintendent, Tony Sinanis, for that.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out to our November 27th board meeting. Hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. I hope all of us did as well. So we're going to start by going out of order, and we're going to talk a little bit about personnel, as Lisa just mentioned, because we have some of our staff members here, and we're excited to congratulate them. And they also have children who probably should be in bed already, but that's okay. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge Kyle Case. Kyle is here. She is one of our teachers in the middle school here at Farragut Middle School, and Kyle teaches 5th grade. And I actually just had the pleasure of spending about an hour in Kyle's class recently. It was an unannounced observation, but I ended up hanging out a lot longer than I intended because I was so engaged in the activity. The kids were learning about the King George and the relationship with the colonists, and Kyle framed it in a way. Is it okay if I share that? She introduced the activity by reading a breakup letter out loud to the kids, and so the colonists were breaking up with King George, if I remember correctly. But the way it was written, it was done with their initials, so the kids didn't know who it was. For the first 15 minutes, I didn't know. I was like, "Oh my God, who's breaking up?" I was like, "Where is this from?" But it was a really great activity, and the kids were so engaged, and Kyle did such a wonderful job, and it was a pleasure to be there and spend time. So. First, we do have Kyle here. So, Kyle, congratulations on your tenure, which was official in August, but we were excited to recognize it here tonight. We also have Donna Gamble. Donna is back there. Donna is our communications teacher over at Hillside. I've also had the pleasure of being in Donna's classroom a couple of times this year, and I think that one thing that really stood out to me the most about being in your room, Donna, was there are such a spectrum of needs that exist in any elementary school, right? But certainly particularly in your class, and yet every child had an entry point to engage in learning, and every child clearly feels valued in that space. And as a dad, I can tell you that that's all I want for my son. So I thank you and congratulate you, Donna, also on your tenure. Also, that was official in August, but we're excited to get to celebrate today here. We also have Daniela Labella, who is a 3rd teacher who is getting tenure. She's not here because I think she just had a baby. Yeah. So, I told her she should really be here, but no. She does have familial priorities, but congratulations to Daniela as well, who's one of our special ed teachers at the middle school. So without further ado, I'd like to congratulate them, but first but you all have to vote to make it official. So,
Okay, so I think we can take all 3 tenure appointments at once. All in favor of approving tenure?
No, take a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. May I have a motion to approve the tenure of the 3 individuals? And a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Terrific.
So now it's official. Congratulations.
And I will say, it takes a village, as we say, to raise the children as we do, and we're always so proud of them. And, we talk about our administrators and our board work and our parent support, but so very much comes down to what happens in those classrooms. You guys are with our kids so much of the day. We trust our children to you. And just know, it's not just tenure that we want to grant, but we also just want to share our gratitude for the kindness and the creativity and the joy you bring into their lives. So thank you. Thank you for all you give our children. Okay.
Thank you to your families for being here as well and coming out.
Yes.
And congratulations. Kyle has got baby, not that you could tell, but she's got baby number 2 on the way. So it was a special time for you. So congratulations again, and thank you for everything you do for our kids. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Feel free to cut out if you need to go because you have business.
Oh, absolutely.
So, all right, so we can flip back to the order.
Okay, so now going back, we can move on to our announcements, and we'll turn that over to you.
First and foremost, just this week on Wednesday, we have an emotional resilience workshop happening here at the high school auditorium, and that is sort of been born of a conversation between PTSA leadership and our building leadership as well. So that is this Wednesday night. It is at 7 p.m. That was the impetus for the rescheduling of the PTSA liaisons meeting at the middle school. So there weren't too many events happening in 1 week. So that has been rescheduled for December 13th. So just as an aside, that is an add-on piece.
Will that be taped?
You know, I don't know if it's going to be videotaped, to be quite honest with you. Patrick, do you know?
We probably have to get permission from the speaker.
Oh, presenters, right.
Yeah. And it's like a panel,
Yeah.
from what and they're going to be looking at emotional resilience and perseverance in adolescents specifically. It's the Westchester Mental Health Association. And I think it's something that potentially, depending on how this goes and what the feedback is like, could also present itself in a different form for, let's say, the elementary school, if that's something that could happen down the road. But it's been a long process in terms of analyzing the needs and getting together and planning for this. So we are excited for this event on Wednesday night. And it complements well an event that was in early October with Dr. Michael Nearney, who also, talked on a similar topic. So we are looking forward to that. We have some other events coming up as well. Please note, an email did go out today just reminding everyone that we have a calendar change for next week. So Monday, there is no school for our kids. They have a lot of work to do, so they will benefit from that day. But our teachers will be engaged in professional development around diversity and cultural competency, so we are looking forward to that. That is an E-Day. That will stay an E-Day, which means Tuesday the 5th will be an F-Day, just so you are all aware of the implications of that. We have a late start on Friday. We have a second late start in the month of December as well. I believe it's December 15th, but we'll have another board meeting before then. Our grades 7 and 8 musical, The Sound of Music, is happening December 8th and 9th. It's sure to be an extravaganza from what I hear. I'm very much looking forward to that. And also on December 13th, Maureen, we are, you want to just quickly fill it in because we don't have it on this, and I apologize, but I think it's an important event to recognize.
Okay, so I was actually telling Tony that a very nice event that the board had brought back a few years back is a dinner that we do with our senior citizens who live in the community. It's a volunteer event, and we have our a preview of our winter concert, which is like a dress rehearsal for our kids, and they perform for our seniors, and then they also come and help have a dinner with them, and we have students serve and kind of sit with different senior citizens. It's a really, Parker, you've been, right, to it? It's a really nice event, and we typically get about somewhere between 50 to 80 senior citizens who live in Hastings and about 50 kids at the event. So that will be December 13th.
Who
And
organizes it?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. And we typically like to have board members, if they can attend also, just to kind of meet some of our senior citizens. And they, from what I'm told by the senior advocate in town, they really look forward to this event every year.
Maureen, the date on that is December?
December 13th,
Okay.
and our senior citizens typically arrive around 4:15. They're then escorted into the theater by some students, and they get to enjoy a really nice private kind of viewing of the
That's a Wednesday.
upcoming concert, and then they come out into the high school lobby area, and we have that all set up, and they either can get on a buffet line, or we serve them dinner. So it's very nice.
2 weeks from Wednesday, is that
It
right?
is, yep.
2 weeks from Wednesday, exactly. And you do get a preview of the winter concert if you can't make it the next night,
Yeah.
which is nice as well. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we had that. So those are some of the important dates coming up and things for us to be aware of. We also have a junior parent college meeting this November 30th. So I believe that's this Thursday night at 7 p.m. for our parents who are with juniors this year. And we have our HHS, our high school PTSA meeting, and our next board meeting on December 11th. So please mark those dates on your calendar as well. I'd like to share some of the highlights from the last several weeks. It's been, I think, since November 6th since we've had a board meeting. So we have a bunch of really wonderful things that have unfolded over the last several weeks. So I'm excited to spotlight those for you tonight and take you through some of the snapshots from there. So one of the first things that occurred actually right after our last board meeting was the Veterans Day Assembly that included an assembly at Hillside and also included the veterans coming down here to the Farragut complex to meet with students. And I could tell you I happened to see a bunch of kids at recess that day and I was like, so what was like one of the highlights of the day? And one of the kids like, oh my God, getting to talk to the veterans and getting them to ask them questions, unprompted. And he was so excited to spotlight that, and having been to the assembly over at Hillside, it was so beautiful. And thank you to Lisa and to PTSA and SEPTA for co-sponsoring and organizing. And Barbara Kennedy?
Barbara Kennedy.
Barbara Kennedy was also an integral part of that. Just was such a positive experience. And for me, like, I got chills as our elementary kids clapped out the veterans from the assembly, and they kind of made their way down the path. It was really incredibly, powerful and moving, and to hear their stories, and that many of the veterans are community, members here who have connections to our kids, and actually 2 of them I happened to see last week at the middle school's Senior Friends Day, and they came in to be part of that. So just to really see that in, people that we know was incredibly powerful. We also had a celebration sponsored by our PTSA to recognize the Blue Ribbon for our high school a couple of weeks ago. So that was really a wonderful experience. I know our teachers are looking forward to the next PTSA catered event because it was so highly, so well received. I'm looking forward to the tray of cupcakes, which is why that picture is here, because they were delicious.
And I will say the PTSA, as a topper on all this, got gifts for, I believe, the entire staff and the board as well. So you may see, I think Parker is sporting the fabulous blue ribbon
lanyard.
Badge holder.
So very excited about those. So thank you to our PTSA for recognizing our staff, and it's such a great opportunity to just get the staff together to sit and eat lunch together. It was just that in itself. So thank you for that event. We also recognized our National Honor Society inductions. This is the fall version. There's a spring version as well, and that one's a bit of a bigger event, but still a huge accomplishment. So we have Patricia, Pearsall, Chiara, Sebastian, and Bianca, who were inducted this time around. It's a really nice ceremony. If you haven't been, I only got to come to this small scale one, but it was great. Kids were involved, the staff as well. So thank you for that, and congratulations to them. We had a Thanksgiving celebration over at Hillside, and our kindergartners, and I know one of our board members was there because he's got a kindergartner. I would have to say it was a pretty cute kickoff to Thanksgiving, and the kids, not only were they there celebrating, they prepared the placemats, and they made these like lanterns. They had songs, and there was food. They also donated non-perishable food. So like every kid marched into the celebration in the lunchroom with like a canned food or some non-perishable food. It was wonderful, and I would have to say we had over 100 adults in attendance as well. I mean, it was wonderful. That night, we also had the Project Share, or not that night, sorry, it was a couple of days later. We had the Project Share Thanksgiving event, which, if you've never been, it is like nothing I've ever seen in my life. And we fed over, I think, 800 homeless people on Tuesday night. And I don't remember her name, Jeannie Newman, who organized the event, who was a former teacher here, stood at the door and greeted the people in need as they were coming off the buses, and they were transported, from different areas of the city, and knew every person's name and knew every person's story, and just to sit and talk to some of these people and hear about their journeys. And I think the thing that struck me most was the number of little kids that were in attendance as well, who are dealing with variables in life that are not easy at all, but to come here and be part of a really positive and warm experience, a meal. There's also music. Our kids were playing music. We sang God Bless America, or America the Beautiful. There was a song,
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace, yes. It was incredible. It was really quite a special night, and so many of our kids were there helping, and kids from other schools, at Forest Hills High School and local districts, came to help. If you've never been, you have to come check it out next year. I've never seen anything like it. It was pretty amazing.
And Tony, if I may add just 2 points. Often you'll hear other school districts say, we have mandatory community service, and, it's an issue that gets bounced around and has a lot attached to it. And I've always felt particularly proud of our district, and I credit our school and Jeannie Newman, that we've never mandated it, but when you put out opportunities to help that are so meaningful and rich, you get everybody wanting to do this, which I think is just a better model anyway, and it will lead to our kids, continuing to care about service, as long as their lives and their careers allow. And the second point I wanted to point out is Parker, I believe, is on the board of Project Share, and I know you were there, and I believe I saw Elliot, you there. Are you on the board as well? No. Oh, okay. So I do want to give a huge shout out, because the amount of work that you guys do, feel free if you want to, share your voice on Project
We were
Fair.
very happy with how the dinner went. We had, every dinner, a lot of work goes in. And it's always a huge relief when we pull it off. It always gets really close, and we have a million things that go wrong at the last minute, but it always comes to its end, and it's an amazing night, and everything is worth it. And we're very grateful to everyone who helped out.
Thank you. And Elliot, did you have anything to add, or?
No,
Okay.
it's amazing.
Well, thank you to you guys and the board and all the students from the depths of our heart.
We also had our middle school senior Friends Day. That was last Wednesday morning, which was great. It was the Think Like a Historian project, and our kids got to sit in small groups with different community members and family members of our kids. And we had people, everything from former military personnel to someone who had been on Sesame Street to someone who was a Holocaust survivor, talking to our kids, and it was really profound to hear their stories. And you could tell, you didn't have to know, but you could tell which kids were sitting by like a grandparent just by the way they were looking at this person talking, like, in a totally different way. And then you had like the most awesome questions. We had one gentleman who was in the military. He was in the Marines. One of the kids was like, all right, I get that you were there for, I don't remember what point, he's like, I get you were where you were for when John F. Kennedy was killed, but can you tell me, when you were in the military, did you learn how to take apart a gun and put it back together, and how fast did you do it? And the guy was like, I've never been asked that question, but yes, I can. So it was great to see that our kids had a point of entry. They wanted to ask questions that were very important to them, and they had the space to do that. So it was great. People brought in pictures and artifacts, and it was amazing. It was a very special activity. And Gail Kipper and Chris Keogh and their teachers were actively involved in the discussions and kind of floating from group to group and helping really make the stories resonate even more with more sort of specific questions, and it was wonderful. So that happened last week. We also had one of our former students. Her research was published. So her name is Leah Goldberg. She graduated 2 years ago, and she did research around seizures and in children and how they reoccur. She had done it part of a science research study here when she was a student. The study had impact beyond, and it was published in a journal, the Academic Emergency Medicine Journal, and she was listed as one of the lead researchers, which is pretty amazing for a kid her age, for anyone her age. And to know that it was, the impetus for that was work that she did here in our science research experience is pretty amazing, and everyone was really proud of Leah for that. So if anyone knows Leah, please tell her family we're seriously impressed. We had the high school play on November 17th, 17th and 18th, and that was As You Like It. It was a take on the Shakespearean play. It included a couple of musical numbers, and it included some, different takes on the characters. Our kids did a beautiful job. I had a chance to see it on opening night, and it was great. Kids were really excited about it. The audience was really engaged. Congratulations to Gerard and Rachel. Rachel, she directed it, and Gerard oversaw that. And then we had a bunch of kids who helped with the lighting and the set production and all that. It was a beautiful presentation. And then just some things coming up. And the Academic Challenge team, which we did not include there, sorry. But we did have the Academic Challenge team also get recognized again. Recently, they won an award at a competition that they recently attended. I don't know. Lisa,
Yeah,
please.
it was another, they do,
Yes.
The C team won the B division.
will you just explain about the A, B, and C? I mean, it's intuitive, but
Yeah.
just spell it out.
So there's an A team.
And you're on the team, right?
Yeah, I
okay.
played
Perfect.
B, but the C,
Fine.
and there were 2 teams that played in the A division, and only 1 team that played in the B division, and our third team won the B division, which is crazy. Because most schools only send 2 teams,
Yeah.
so it was our third team versus all the second teams, and they won, which is pretty crazy.
Thank you, Elliot.
You
for
guys are
filling out
bringing
that.
such pride to this school. You just keep winning and winning nationally, winning locally, and thank you for all the honor you bring to us.
Congratulations, nicely done. Anything else that the two of you want to add as part of this update? Anything from high school or student council or anything you want us to know? And you've shared a lot already, but
You want to talk about Saturday for classes?
In Latin.
I'm no longer in Latin. It's really fun, and you should go support because the Rome trip is.
What it is?
It's like a celebration for the like the Latin program at the school, and Miss Elena runs it, and it's really fun. And it's like,
Proceeds go to the trip.
yeah, and all the proceeds go to the Rome trip.
The Latin
Oh, that's great.
department is taking a trip to Rome over February break. So
And there's like trivia and fun videos, and it's fun.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Thank you for that update. And that's happening on December 7th, which is next Thursday. So at 6 o'clock. So feel free to stop by for that celebration as well. So thank you. That's my update, and thank you to Parker and to Emily for jumping in as well, filling in the blanks. Much appreciated.
Okay, next on our agenda is public comment, and we just have two announcements before that. One is we're going to move around our agenda a bit. We've had some emails today about the item on photo and internet, and we're guessing that's what some of the public comment about. So we're going to move that discussion up to follow the public comment. So if anybody had wanted to be here for that, it just means you don't have to wait till the very end of the meeting to hear that discussion, so we're going to move that up. And then Donna, who is on the policy committee, wanted to speak for a moment about process.
Yeah, I was just going to really just frame the what I would normally say under new business, which is that the policy committee was reviewing policy 8630, acceptable technology use policy. We yeah. I can get closer to it. Is that better? There you go. Okay. Yeah, so the one policy that we have on the agenda tonight for a first read is 8630, which is the first read, for those in the audience, is after the policy committee has discussed and reviewed a policy. We put it out for a first read, which gives the board a chance to review what's being recommended and to discuss it if there are questions, to see if there's further input that's needed before changes are made. And then once those additional changes are made, if there are any that are required, at a future meeting, it would go up for a second read. And it's not until that second read that the policy is finalized and that the board would vote on it and decide whether or not to adopt the changes. In terms of this particular policy, we recognize the fact that there's sort of a larger discussion that I think we would like to have before potentially some larger changes are made to the policy, because we know that have been discussions at a liaison meeting and also some emails that the board has received from various parents that we'd like to, hear and consider. The only thing that we had really put in here in this first read is that we've had a very long-standing policy of having at the beginning of the year, when packets go out to parents, one of the forms that they can sign is a policy to opt out of having their children's pictures or images used anywhere. And we realized that our policy, which was also long-standing, was not in sync with the ability to use that opt-out form. And so the policy had actually just said that any posting of photographs of children was prohibited, when in fact what we've been doing really certainly as long as my kids have been in the district, I don't know, I think it's probably even longer than that, is that parents are given the ability at the start of the year to opt out if they don't want their kids' pictures published. So the language we were suggesting changing just for that one specific paragraph was to say that the district posting of any photographs or video featuring students with or without identifiable information on the internet or email will be consistent with the district's opt-out procedures, meaning that if a family is opted out and doesn't want their child's image in either photos or videos used, then they would have the ability to do that and their image would not be used. We can decide, and this was after the committee discussed this, we felt that it was time to bring to the rest of the board to decide whether, given that this one thing was sort of an oversight in the way this policy had been worded for many, many years, whether we wanted to go ahead and in the near future make this one change so the fact that parents can opt out and, or not choose to opt out which is something that they get that letter at the beginning of the year, was not really incorporated into the policy. We can decide to approve that change, or we can hold off even making this change if we first want to have a larger conversation about other aspects of this policy, or regarding the posting of children's images either on our website or in any other medium. So we can either leave the policy exactly the way it is right now until we have that larger conversation, or we can decide as a board that we'd like to make this small tweak now, but still have that larger conversation, which may lead to more changes later. So that was kind of where, as a committee, we had gotten to, and we felt that we needed to talk to the rest of the board to get everybody else's input on that. And then I think, given the amount of emails and comments we've had on this topic, I think we, as a board, we're going to want to talk about whether we just want to sort of make it an agenda item on a future meeting or specifically make it a hearing. I'm not sure what the pros and cons of doing it one way or another. I mean, either way we could, if we want to have a chance for, I think that the idea is that we think we'd like to get parental input and have a chance at a future meeting for parents to come and give us their opinions on that topic. But I think the other thing that we'll need to talk about, which we can do after the public comment as opposed to before, is decide whether we want to go ahead with sort of fixing this thing that is an oversight in the existing policy, and then talk about larger changes subsequently, or whether we want to hold off doing anything until we have that larger conversation.
Okay, so with that, let's move into public comment. So I would ask whoever wants to please come to the podium, state your name, and you don't have to state your address, but just state whether you live in Hastings.
I'm just very confused by it. My name is Jennifer DePriest. I live in Hastings. I have a child currently in 6th grade and a child in 7th grade. I'm going to ask a question very specifically about what you just said and about this policy, which is about this proposed change. When you say internet, I'm not sure what it is that you mean, and if you are including social media in that, because social media is not the internet, as those are two very different things. So I would love some clarification about whether you were referring to posting these photos and videos on social media. Is that correct? Or
I think we were looking at it broadly to include any platform on the internet, because at this point it just says internet and email as the policy stands. And so I think we were trying to be consistent with what the practice has been in the district, which included the website, which includes a Facebook page, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
okay.
So the language, as I said, this isn't necessarily the final language, because as I'm seeing what this sentence says here, it still talks about internet or email. So if the policy is supposed to be, if we want it to be more broad and talk about any forms of social media that you don't consider to be actually part of,
well, it's not really
the internet, then, that language can be
right. Okay.
Can be
so that
clarified.
just threw me a little bit, because I was confused by that. I guess my comment is sort of generally, I've already spoken with Dr. Sinanis about my concerns about the sort of lax posting of photos of children on the internet and also in social media. And I've also communicated some of my thoughts to some members of the board. I would hope that we could have a community discussion about this. I think it's something that should not be decided. I know we voted for you, but it shouldn't be something that's decided by the board, because there are so many privacy, legal, social, corporate, there's so many other concerns related to this that I'm not sure that everybody is considering. And we have so many thoughtful, interesting people in this community who deal with these issues every single day. I'll just cite Doug Rushkoff, who isn't here, but who's written so thoughtfully about these issues. And it would be really helpful, I think, if parents had an opportunity to understand some more of the issues if they don't already know them, and could make some of our concerns clear in a public hearing. This is a very significant change, in my opinion. It's a change. We've only been in this district for 2 years, but I wasn't particularly aware that teachers are posting on their personal Twitter feeds photographs of children. And I just don't think that's acceptable for my child, and I would like the opportunity to opt out of that and then have a larger conversation about whether it's something that makes sense for our district. Why would we have teachers in our community modeling that kind of behavior, whether it's taking photos during class, whether it's curating their lives using content drawn from our classrooms? That is a very deep and important discussion that shouldn't be made, by just you guys, and not that I'm saying it would be, and shouldn't be made kind of at a meeting that people just kind of have to have the good sense to attend. It is a serious, serious issue. Do our teachers want their pictures on your Twitter feed? I don't know.
I asked them.
And I think every single one of them said they wanted to.
I ask anyone that I would use to post, yeah.
So
I always check.
again, I think that's something that we should all be talking about in a larger community, not just in this kind of forum. And so I would hope that there'd be maybe some information that goes out to parents so they can make a decision to come to this hearing. So some of the nature of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, their terms of service, the licenses that are being granted to these companies, to the content that teachers are posting. So all of these issues are discussed so that the district's lawyer has an opportunity to weigh in, because I think there are a bunch of legal issues and statutes that apply to some of the postings and all of those sorts of things. So my only comment, I don't want to belabor it, I've talked enough and I've made these comments in other meetings. My only question is that it shouldn't be that by sending our children to school that we are making decisions about their presence in social media. And so I would hope that we could have that larger discussion as a community.
Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to offer a public comment? Sure, just come on up to the podium. Oh.
Hi, I'll be brief. My name is Emma Sollers. I have 2 children at Hillside, and I'm a Hastings resident. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Jennifer just spoke about. Thank you for that. I wanted to just add that I think there needs to be some clarity about the opt-out procedure, if there is an opt-out procedure, and how it's enforced. My son, I opted out for both of my children for posting on the internet, and my son informed me today that there's a picture of him on the website. It's not a huge deal. I'm not 100% confident that it's followed in all cases. I think that there are. It seems like there's different procedures if it's like a public, if it's like one of the assemblies versus in the classroom. And I just think we as a district should be really clear about how it's enforced, what the policy is, and perhaps the opportunity to opt in or out of, of different things. I have no problem with my son being in the yearbook or being on a class webpage. I don't want him on Facebook. I don't want him on Twitter. And that's my view and the view of my family. So, if there's a way to be a little bit more specific about that in the policy and communicate that to the parents, I think that would be really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melanie Hoops, and I have 2 kids. I have a 7th grader and a 9th grader here. And I actually, like Jennifer mentioned, Doug Rushkoff, he gave me a letter that I think he sent to you, and he asked me to read it tonight.
He sent it to the full board. Oh, he asked you to read it. Okay.
He did.
Thank you.
I am Douglas Rushkoff, 20 South Calumet. There's his address. Sorry.
Just move back from the mic a little bit. Just give it. Yeah, there you go.
I'm also the author of 17 books and 4 television documentaries about life in the digital media environment, a professor of media and society at CUNY, founder of its Laboratory for Digital Humanism, research fellow at Institute for the Future, and a frequent consultant on computers, education, and digital health to school districts, the U.S. Congress, the White House, the United Nations, and governments around the world. Wow. I am still enthusiastic about the promise of digital technology to enhance education and human potential, but I am also aware of who constructed our social media platforms and for what purpose. Social media makes money by encouraging engagement, or what they call eyeball hours, by any means necessary. They employ advanced psychological tactics in order to make people, young and old, feel bad if they don't check in regularly, and worse if they try to leave a platform altogether. The streak feature on Snapchat, for example, was developed in the Captology Lab of Stanford University. Captology, as the name suggests, is the study of how to capture and maintain attention. The streak is simply a number corresponding to how many days in a row you chatted with a particular person. It is also a way to turn socializing and posting into a competitive sport. It will make anyone, even teachers or a school superintendent, feel terrible about missing a day of posting. It is just one of hundreds of techniques used by social media to make people anxious and depressed, such as adding pictures of your ex having fun to your newsfeed. Some techniques were drawn from Las Vegas slot machine algorithms, themselves based on decades of practice addicting gamblers to self-destructive behaviors. My friends, the people who develop Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms are now regretting what they did, but they are powerless to change things. This is because the companies they work for are run by shareholders who simply want more hours, more posts, more engagement from us by any means necessary. Sean Parker, the ex-founder of Napster, who guided young Mark Zuckerberg through the early days of Facebook, says the platform was built by consciously exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology, focused on figuring out how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. Now Parker says he's a conscientious objector from social media and worries about what it's doing to our children's brains. These are America's most powerful businesses seeking to infiltrate our awareness. They are not only psychologically damaging, but intellectually compromising. We multitask, assuming that, like our computers, we can do more than one thing at the same time. Study after study has shown that multitasking humans invariably get less done, less accurately, with less depth and less understanding. This is true even when we believe we have accomplished more. Other studies have shown that we function poorly and remember less if our smartphone is in the same room, even if it is turned off. We read slower and with less comprehension if our email program is open in the background, even if the program's window is completely covered. The algorithms of social media feeds can not only predict our future behavior, but change it. They intentionally discourage creative outcomes that defy their predictions or stray from our big data classifications. They actively and intentionally reduce innovative and nonconformist behavior. Social media makes us less able to separate fact from fiction, makes us feel worse about our lives, lowers our self-esteem, and increases tribal, racial, and nativist divisions. It profits off polarity, sectionalism, violence, and impulsiveness. As my friend, the inventor of virtual reality, Jaron Lanier, puts it, the popular platforms are designed for behavior modification. Why would you go sign up for an evil hypnotist who's explicitly saying that this whole purpose is to get you to do things that people have paid him to get you to do, but he won't tell you who they are? A school district may have real reasons for resorting to social media, as detailed by Dr. Sinanis in his books, but none of them apply to Hastings-on-Hudson. A district with poor community relations may seek to improve them by posting pictures on social media feeds. If attendance at school events is low, or if the town is too big for people to be exposed to school children, social media can be used to promote a school budget. These are not problems Hastings faces. We see each other in real life. In communities where people have face-to-face contact, social media does not improve relationships. Research shows that it degrades them. A famously bad school district can use social media to chronicle and publicize its turnaround to the world at large. This can help attract new families to the district, increase property values, and in turn, increase the tax base. This is not a problem Hastings faces either. Social media can help school administrators and employees promote their perspectives and careers. An educator may implement a classroom approach and want to publicize it, both to share practices with other educators or to position themselves for a better job somewhere else, or even just better book sales. That's fine, but it makes the classroom secondary to some other agenda and turns the students into unwitting promotional tools. Better to do this on a website or blog than a competitive and manipulative social media platform anyway. Finally, when teachers or administrators are using social media in the classroom or at school activities, it models the addictive, life-negating behavior that we don't want our kids to emulate. If teachers are looking for social media opportunities during the school day, then they are being distracted from the face-to-face, in-person contact that defines classroom education. Taking a selfie with a student, however well-meaning, conveys that the moment is less significant than the tweet. Sad. I want my kid to feel that what she's accomplished in class matters in its own right, even if it's not posted to Facebook. Social media should not be mistaken for the internet. These platforms are categorically different than a school's website. They are private companies using black box technology to sell data about us and use it against us in ways they themselves are appalled by. Steve Jobs did not let his kids use an iPad. The Facebook employees I know will not let their kids go to schools that use social media. Social media companies have spent billions of dollars developing I've never seen it written like this, algorithmically changed adaptive mind-controlled methodologies as well as propaganda and government lobbying on why these activities make us stronger, smarter, more popular, happier, richer, and more loved. It's very hard to fight this psychological manipulation, and the more we use social media, the more we accept its premises. Right now, those of us in the digital trenches are dealing with a problem named ElsaGate. Hundreds of videos targeting children that have been designed to pass through YouTube's safety filters so they appear in the pre-approved YouTube's Kids channel. They depict stories such as baby Elsa from Disney's Frozen stealing her parents' liquor, drinking it, turning violent, and killing her sister. Another shows baby Spider-Man being raped by his father and other scenes calculated by their makers to inflict psychological trauma on American children. It's a pediatric form of the same mimetic warfare used against American adults in the last presidential election cycle, and we still don't know who is behind them. You get through YouTube's algorithms because those algorithms are not really there to help kids. They are there to help advertisers reach kids and to make humans more predictable, less coherent, more anxious, and less genuinely social. This space favors the trolls, the abusers, the marketers. It's hard enough raising kids. Now there's a multi-trillion-dollar industry working overtime to make our kids less cooperative, more irritable, and hyper-reactive. And we're already required to surrender our kids to these companies because so much education is happening online. Making money is not bad, but making money by abusing people through intentionally addictive technologies is bad. The internet is fabulous public utility. Social media are privately owned platforms operated so maliciously that they constitute public health crisis. In brief, my recommendation for an internet photo policy is school websites, yes, parents can opt out. Local paper, yes, parents can opt out. Social media, no, should not be used at all in the classroom except as a media literacy example. We must not let our own addiction to social media cloud our judgment about how to educate our children and represent our district. Keep this stuff out of the classroom until you understand who's behind it, how it works, and how it is influencing your choices. Thank you, Doug Rushkoff.
Melanie, thank you so much for taking the time to come here and read Doug's statement, and please thank Doug for taking the time to prepare that.
Hi. Thanks, guys. I'm Mark Declan. I'm a dad here in Hastings. I've got a son in preschool, and my daughter's a second grader at Hillside. I want to add my agreement to everything that was said before me. I can't really add anything in terms of eloquence. Truly, I can't. But I can add some personal experience. I'm not only a dad here in Hastings, I've made a living as an actor for about 25 years. So I have extensive personal, professional experience with publicity. I have my own publicist. I have a significant online presence. And so I use publicity. I'm aware of its advantages. I'm not, in a knee-jerk way, opposed to it. However, I've also learned firsthand how nasty and creep-filled it can be. When my daughter was younger and my son was newborn, my wife and I naively went to a few publicity events. I've dealt with creepers, stalkers. I had one stalker for 10 years. I've dealt with overzealous fans who want to get to know you better. So I always knew, okay, I have to be protective of my kids, and I've worked very hard to balance my professional public life and my own privacy. But when my daughter was very young and my son was first born, we naively went to a few publicity events thinking, oh, this is harmless, this is family friendly. People magazine wanted to do a birth announcement when my son was born. And we thought, wow, that's sweet. You would be shocked. I'm not going to repeat some of them here because some of the lewd, offensive, disgusting comments that were made in the comment section about a 2-week-old baby. People literally were making sexualized comments about my 2-week-old son because People magazine announced that he had just been born. I've seen it firsthand. We decided, my wife and I decided that we were going to work our asses off to keep our kids out of the spotlight. So I think for me personally, one of the things that I want to be very clear about, or that I want to have clarity on, is that whatever form any of this might take, and I agree with, we need to have these conversations about social media, about the addictive nature of it, about what modeling we're giving our kids in the classroom. At an immediate level, I would want to know that there was always an opt-out option, a very detailed opt-out option, no matter what form any of this takes. Because just speaking for myself, I'm opting out. I don't want my kids out there. That's me. I'm not saying everybody else needs to make the same choice I'm making, but I am very strongly saying we cannot take the choice away from parents. We can't. And I agree. It's not a decision that can be made in this room, and that's no offense to you guys at all. It needs to be a community discussion. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm actually feeling very emotional at the moment because it's something I feel incredibly passionate about. I can't tell you what it's like to read something like some of the things that were said about, or there was a Secret Santa thing we went to with my daughter, another thing we went to, and the event itself was lovely, and a lot of the comments were lovely, but some of the comments were literally, they were sexualizing my 3-year-old daughter and talking about the things they wanted to do to my 3-year-old daughter, and anyway, I'm not going to go on. It's something I feel very passionately about, and I think I'm not the only person in the community who feels this way. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
One thing, sorry.
Oh, sure, and I just wanted to thank you, and thank you for sharing, and we could all feel how hard it was, but thank you for sharing your personal experience.
Just really quickly, I'm sorry, I'll make it really short. We also have an obligation to people who come into our building to protect their privacy and not put those people on social media. And just as a brief example, when people came to the Project Share event, did they know that they were going to end up in social media?
Yes.
Like, they were all told, but are we asking them in a situation of like duress, where like they have, in order to come in and participate, they have to agree to be put on people's Twitter feeds and identified as people in need? Like,
for the district, they were personally asked if they had any problems if their photo was taken and put on the Facebook page of the school district, and if there was any reservation, it was not taken.
Again, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not just about children and not just about being able to opt out our children. It's about how are we engaging with the public? How are we using these social media platforms? And how are we respecting the privacy of everybody who comes into our building?
Thank you.
I'm Ann Cunningham. I am speaking today as the co-president of the PTSA, and I'm here to just reiterate my request that we solicit comments from the community. I have heard from many, many parents. I've even heard from parents recently who don't understand the changes to the proposed changes to the district policy. They don't understand what it means by opt-out procedure. They keep looking for the procedures. They keep asking me for them. I tell them that I believe it's the form that they signed at the beginning of the school year, but they don't believe me because that doesn't make sense to them. So there's a serious problem with the way the The policy proposed changes are vague, and the way the opt-out procedure is, the opt-out form is also vague. There is a huge problem with both, so if we proceed without getting public comment, we're going to just create a morass. It's going to be a huge problem for everybody, because people don't even know what they're agreeing to anymore. So I respectfully request that I had many people who were angry that I didn't send out a survey of my own. Got a lot of comments on that, so if you could send out a survey, or if you want us to do it, we will, just to get comments from the community about how they want this to look, how they want, really preferably an opt-in form to look as opposed to an opt-out form. I also got a lot of people come to me and talk about how they were very concerned for their particular children, because not all children like to be photographed, and not all children want to perform and be on display. And a lot of kids, that will affect their learning environment if these pictures are taken in their safe place when they don't want them to happen. So there were a lot of parents that were concerned specifically for their children with respect to this. And a lot of people are worried about the legal issues of posting photos on kids, and have they really been fully, completely looked at by the lawyers in the school district. There's FERPA. There are other privacy laws. There are other things to be considered, you know, who owns these photos. There are a lot of different legal issues. Have the lawyers actually looked at them? And that's a concern for a lot of parents. And a lot of other parents were very just upset at the idea that cameras or phones would be in a classroom. The distraction that would create for the children, and the modeling of behavior that we really don't want to model. So I just want to reiterate, please, before you change anything, because I don't think the district policy as it is currently written was an oversight. I think the fact that the policy wasn't followed was the oversight, and I don't think we should then change it just to sort of make everything better. We need to talk to parents and what they want, and how they want to protect their children. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and please thank the PTSA as well. You know, the PTSA had emailed us, and with a very thoughtful laying out of issues, and it's very helpful.
I'm Deborah King. I have a student, I live here in Hastings, and I have a student in the high school and one who just graduated. I want to say that it scares me, the thought that this could have just happened so very quickly and almost in a blasé fashion of first read, second read, hey, let's change everything, that actually affects our children, not only right now, but also going forward. Because once something is out on the internet, it is out there forever. You have no control over it after that happens. And there are specific social media sites that then own those images. And you have no say in it, because that is part of their policy, and that is part of what you sign off on in using those social media sites. Images can be taken and used and altered and then used at somebody's pleasure, which is frightening to me to think about. And to have it come from a school setting where our children, let's face it, are even legally mandated to be here many hours of the day, to put them in a situation where it is now a glass bowl, and they are the little fish being looked at by the entire world, because nobody knows what is going to happen to that image that is posted. It has now become worldwide, potentially, as opposed to them coming to the school for an academic education, hopefully for social education, hopefully to have a place where they can grow and be educated and make mistakes, and maybe not have those mistakes plastered everywhere, whether it was well-intentioned or not. And I don't think somebody's going to intentionally plaster something horrific. But that moment in that child's life, or maybe even that moment with how they looked with braces on. Okay, I had braces when I was 12. for about a week I went around like this and then gave up. I'm not sure I would love to see those images of me posted everywhere for eternity. And if my job or something or my career depended on a certain image later in life, I'm not sure I want somebody to be able to find that image as easily as typing in my name on Google or Bing or Yahoo and coming up with things that came out of my school district, as opposed to maybe my parents making a mistake and I can blame them, or as opposed to me making a mistake and putting it on the internet myself. But this is a place where kids have to be and should feel safe being. And I think that the adults in the district and the board should be looking more at how do we protect our children's privacy, not how do we, I don't know, show how great we are. I don't know what the need is, honestly, I really don't. Because I think we're a great district. I think we have awards. I think we win things on all aspects. We have academic champions, we have sports champions, we have music champions. And these are all on the district website, and if I see a form to opt out of something, I assume that I'm opting out or in to a district website that I assume has some oversight to it, and that we're seeing the same goals, that we would like to promote the district or see things in a good light. That doesn't mean that that's how a teacher is using these images, or somebody who was formerly a teacher but still has these images on their phone. I don't know. This scares me. I can't, as a parent, possibly, nor can the board, nor can anybody in the district, monitor teachers' personal Facebooks. You would have to be accepted as their friends for everybody. There can be things out there, if this is allowed by the district, they can be out anywhere and nobody can see them until it's way too late. And then if the board has approved something like this, there is no recourse. Everyone's allowed to do it. It can be everywhere. I think that our kids' privacy is so important, and the district itself has all sorts of material on our kids, and they need to. You've got health records, you've got educational records, academic records. These things can follow our kids, and if they can be found out, or if they can be hacked into, or if they can be, if we're posting things with kids' names, we don't even identify in the policy what identifying information we're allowing. Are people assuming that's their names? Well, maybe it's also what class they're in. Well, maybe they're in a special needs class. Maybe they're somewhere else that they may not want people to know about in 15 years, or maybe they don't care, but that should be their choice. And I just think that it's very dangerous to have something so vague and so open, and I think it is the parents' choice and should be the parents' choice. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Is there anyone else who wanted to make a public comment? Okay.
Hi, Steve Goldfinger. I live in Hastings. I have 2 kids in the schools. I'm going to switch topics. It's not about this, although it's hard to speak about anything else since it's just very moving, very upsetting what people have been discussing. I actually wanted to bring up a different topic, which was really about the upcoming budget discussions. I know in the past there's been community involvement. It kind of fizzled over the last few years, but I'm hoping that members of the community or the board would somehow reconsider some sort of format, forum for, including people. The meetings used to actually be face-to-face. There was some interesting discussion. I understand that a lot of the numbers are fixed. We get it. But even if there's 10%, I mean, when I look at that budget, and I confess I looked at an old budget earlier, I still don't get, like, the district copier expense, like $60,000. If we have 1,500 students, I just don't get where the paper's going. My kids aren't bringing home a lot of paper. I know it's a small thing, but when you start to add up 60,000 here and 15,000 there, maybe something can change. I know the budget keeps going up every year, as it should, One of the interesting expenses to me was the price of, or the cost of security, which makes sense. But as this discussion was going on about, the internet, I was thinking, on the one hand, we want to protect our kids. To me, there's no oversight when it comes to social media and the internet. So I don't, that's a whole other issue. But again, I hope the board would consider doing something like this. I think part of the problem always was the participation of the community, but each of you has sort of a support base. I mean, if you each got like 5 friends to come to a meeting, we'd have 30 people. Maybe include some of the high school students. They could really see what this educational process really costs. Make it interesting in a different way. So that's my wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve and I were CBAC mates. CBAC was the Citizen Budget Advisory Committee, and that was the vehicle we used. And we have been, we are committed to finding a new, hopefully more meaningful way of engagement. And just to let you know where we are right now is Tony is going to, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony's going to reach out to some of his colleagues to see if there are more meaningful methods that are being used. And, hopefully we can have this discussion at our next meeting. That's our goal. We're hoping to achieve that because we do want to have some kind of meaningful input. Like I said, I was with you and I felt the frustration, and if you saw me react to you about the district copiers, I've made the same comment. So yeah, there is a lot to look at, things that Maureen can easily explain to us, and then sometimes maybe ideas that the community can offer that are helpful. So thank you. Is there any more public comment? Okay, so with that, then let's advance to.
Speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elliot.
I just had a question about the opt-out.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with the language on that, but thank you. So let's say you opt out your child. At what length, what camera distance does that mean you can't? If you have a crowd of people in Hillside, right, and you want the 4th grade graduation, can they not be filmed and put on the district website? Are you gonna not put that picture
It's
up?
a great question, because I've actually wondered that myself. Say if you're part of a sports team,
Yeah.
but your parent has opted you out, but we're having a group photo, or the soccer team won. So I'll turn that over to
I would turn it over to Jeannie. I do think we have the parameters are different when there's a public event or a group gathering.
It's a public event. Anyone can be photographed.
Okay.
That's the law. If you're at a public gathering in a public place, anyone can have their photograph taken, and it can be used for whatever purpose. Even if I were to give a newspaper a picture of our 5 national merit students or something, every newspaper has a Facebook page. I cannot control that image doesn't go from the hard copy to the Facebook page of a newspaper or gets tweeted out by someone. There's no control beyond that. So either you have to be in or you have to be completely out. But if it is a public event, your photo can be taken without any consent from you.
And has that public event term come up in argument in any recent past? Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Turn it over to the attorneys.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Considered public venue? Because you're saying a public event in a public place.
Yeah, it's school.
Are school grounds, anything on school grounds, is that public?
If it's public, yeah. If it's on school grounds and a public event, it's a public event.
Janine, do you mean, just to give an example of a public event, like we have a play and anybody can come in and purchase a ticket and attend, as opposed to a regular school day where the public cannot come in? We have a guard system, and you can only come in if you have a reason to be
Well, that's a big
Yeah.
issue in school districts today. So you have a play, and you have an audience full of parents taking pictures of their child on stage and doing whatever they want with that picture. How do we control it? Do we then take everybody's cell phones away? Do we take everybody's cameras away? That's something the board will have to discuss. And no photos will be allowed of anything done in the school auditorium, even if it's open to the public or to other parents. That means nothing, if you decide that, no pictures can be taken, then no pictures can be taken by anybody.
Is this not about district posting of pictures, not marriage? I feel like we're conflating issues in order to kind of move away from some of the issues that we're talking about.
No, I think your issues are
You're
very
talking,
good.
well, no, because a random woman or brand sitting in the audience taking a picture is not the same as the school district choosing to post images of students.
Kids' pictures still get posted.
Right.
But still, other than kids' pictures still get posted.
And I think I will say that the PTSA in its email, I think to us and to the public, laid out a number of issues, and one of those was, should there be, again, say there is an opt-in form with a number of boxes, should there be separate, different treatment for something where the public is allowed to attend and not? I think at this point, maybe we should turn over to a discussion, because I think the first thing that we would, and I'm not closing you out, Elliot. The PTSA did formally ask, PTSA Executive Board did formally ask us to consider hosting a hearing on this. So I think at this point, we can talk about whether we think that that's appropriate to do. And I will also say, if any board member wanted to, get involved and discuss either process or substance, obviously you can do that too, and I will throw it up. But first, let me recognize Elliot. Did you have something more to share?
No, I was just going to say, I was thinking, just district posting. Those, the front things on the website, the ones that, scroll by, there's some things you can't, I feel like you can't avoid not taking pictures of someone in certain circumstances.
Right.
How about
it is
when
really
the soccer
hard and
team
complex.
wins the state championship? Perfect example.
I was asking about
Okay. So with that, why don't we open it up to the board? Anybody who has comments, feedback on whether to hold a hearing, on any comments you've had, on any questions, any input that you all have?
So I'm in favor of a hearing. I think it's a good idea. I think even if you look at the opt-out form or the current policy, they were both written in a different world, I think, a completely different world. A world where we didn't have to make some of these distinctions between, I still don't know if the internet and social media are distinctions, but let's go with that and say that they are, where we didn't have to make those distinctions. And I think, I think Doug Rushkoff's note probably put to words a lot of things that I've probably been thinking about, but never was able to articulate it quite that well. But that being said, I think it's important we have a public hearing. And, Elliot, as you raise these points, I think this is maybe one of the biggest things the policy committee is going to have to look at this year, and then us as a board. And I don't feel comfortable having a more substantive conversation about it until we hear from more of the public, and then really be able to dig down into some of these issues a little bit more. Because I can tell you, as someone who's got a 7, 5, and 3-year-old, I'm very aware of the idea that everything that they're doing is online. Or has the potential to be online, and I never had to deal with that, I think I could just imagine we're going to get to a potential place where we realize the negative ramifications of some of this stuff further down the road, and I think I think there's a place that one on the continuum that says free reign, do whatever you want to do, and there's another place at the other end that says everything shut off, not a picture anywhere. And I think probably the only thing I think we could agree on this board on is we don't want to live at either end of those continuum. And as soon as you move to the middle, it gets to be really a bit dicey and hairy and some challenging decisions. And I think that's something I would love to hear from more of the community about and have that tough conversation together.
Yeah, just to sort of piggyback off that, I absolutely think that there should be some sort of community forum and an opportunity for people to come and attend and also do some sort of survey. I think sometimes it's really important to try and get out those surveys and I know it's through an e-blast, but very often I think my experience is very often sort of like it's the same people who are responding to the surveys. So I would really like to find a way to get those surveys to different constituents within the community so we could really hear what everybody is thinking. And that's not to say that the people who respond to surveys aren't absolutely on point, but I would really like to get sort of like a broader take. What I'm really confused about and sort of we started dealing with this in the policy committee, about 6-8 weeks ago. And then within the board, we have had conversations, emails and whatnot, and I've sent some things around. What I'm sort of confused about is how the social media is currently being used. So some of it appears to be district-based, but then some of it, through what I hear through other people, are, as was mentioned before, teachers' personal accounts. And I guess I would like to get a sense, where is that happening? And this is not like a witch hunt to find out which teachers are doing it or not. And if any teachers are doing it, I don't think it's necessarily should be something that's punitive, because we've never had this conversation before. But I think we really need to figure out where this is happening, and at least for now, say no more. Not until we come to a decision as a community, we need to put a stop to it. I hear I'm sorry I'm going on and on, but I have a lot of thoughts about this. So
Christina, there's no time limit on you, don't worry.
I also heard, the very personal comments that many of you had about, what it's like to be a kid and then have things out there and how people have been targeted. I also think it's important to note that sometimes children are coming from families that are divided for whatever reason. It could be moms or dads. It could be just divisions within families. And I think it's also important to note that sometimes families don't want information out there about their children for that reason as well. In addition to sort of like, the stalker, the pedophile, and all of that, the creepers and whatnot, which are totally valid. But also within our own families, within our own relationships with people, there are certain things we don't want out there. So I guess that's another point I want to make. When I was thinking about it, and I tried to go and access the opt-out. So you saw that email I sent around, and we now have the opt-out on the website. I went and I printed them out because I was like, I know I signed this for my kids, but I can't remember what it looks like because I really didn't make a copy of it. So I went on and I tried to find it. So it looks like the Hillside opt-out is very similar to the middle school opt-out, which is a little bit different than the high school. And when I was reading it, I thought to myself, you know what? I kind of feel like I didn't I wasn't as thoughtful about it as I should have been. It says that I do not want my child's photograph to appear in any publications. I do not want my child's name to appear in any publications, name rather. And then the last one is for the yearbook. So when I got to thinking about this, I just thought about the word publications. I mean, I kind of come from the generation where I think of publications as like a newspaper. I don't really think about online anything as a publication. I certainly don't necessarily consider it, a fact necessarily. But I felt like this, even before this conversation, in hindsight, looking at these forms, I feel like the forms themselves are just beyond outdated. And I feel like there needs to be some sort of consistency between school districts, schools themselves, not districts. We're in one district.
School buildings.
Buildings, thank you. It's in another district. In any event, so I feel like the language needs to be consistent. So as parents are moving from Hillside, their kids from Hillside to Farragut to high school, the vocabulary needs to be the same. And maybe, and I'm not saying it should be, but maybe things change as kids get older. Maybe wants or what parents are willing to do or wanting to do, or kids are now saying, no, don't do this, or please do that. Maybe it comes into consideration as well. So those were just like a few of my thoughts. I have more, which I could come back to later, but I'll give the floor up.
So I'm going to say something that might be not, I don't want to say politically correct, but...
Jody, do you mind coming a little closer? Thank you.
A little more. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm feeling very torn because I think, on one hand, I think many people spoke tonight and were extremely articulate and pointed out a lot of different aspects of this and issues that we need to think about. And I also, on that side, feel like it's important for us to be able to hear from people and hear from anyone who has a perspective on this. And then there's this other part of me that's thinking, just from the people that we've heard from tonight, and perhaps maybe some letters that we've gotten, I think we have a broad weigh-in of what the issues are, what a lot of the issues are, what people's concerns are, and there's a part of me that thinks that we could have an open hearing, and obviously we'll do that if that's what people think, but it also seems like it's worth maybe the policy committee starting to work and come up with something that we could then present to people, taking all of these things, that we already have and that we know into account, and trying to come up with a policy. I feel like I want us to move forward, and in the interest of time and the holidays and everything. And again, I'm weighing it because I don't want people to feel like they can't have the ability to have their opinion and their thoughts heard about it. But, I think people tonight were really put a lot of important things on the table that need to be considered, and that we might be able to kind of craft. I don't think we've moved forward doing anything, even though I think people might feel like we've moved forward, but that we might be able to craft something that's the beginning of the working policy that could then have people weigh in on before it becomes, signed, sealed, and delivered.
I'm just I'm effectively thinking the exact same thing, which is, I think, well, there's two things. I guess I'm interested to hear the pro case for active engagement within the school community on social media sites, but that's a bit speaking to my own politics. Like, I've always struggled to see the pro case for it, so I'm interested to hear what that might be, and maybe that would come out of a public forum, which would be certainly interesting. I'm doubtful that will come up in a public forum, but I'd be very interested to hear it. But 100% to Jody's point, I think a sequencing of work, a public forum without some effort being made by the policy committee to come up with at least some initial thoughts around what's an appropriate framing of a media policy in the 21st century opens the door for 3 hours of similar comments, which leave us in a place of having to write a policy which undoubtedly probably won't be perfect in its first go, since we're working on new ground. So as a board, what I'd like to try to do is come up with some initial structure, initial blueprint, something that's then shared, so that I think a forum is a great idea. I don't,
You're proposing a straw man?
What would you say that?
A straw man?
Effectively, yes.
Yeah. That was an inside joke.
Yes, indeed.
The suggestion is just a
But yeah,
working model.
I think that's the way. I think that's the way forward. And it's not a fully formed survey as much as this is a rough blueprint.
So I totally agree with Christina here, because I think that when in policy committee, when three of us with Tony were talking about this, I think what we were concerned in terms of getting current practice in line with the policy had to do with the website. Because this policy, the way it's written, sort of implies that you can't ever post a child's picture anywhere. And I think that we were thinking in a very limited way around the website, the newsletter that the board puts out 2 or 3 times. How many times a year do you?
Twice.
Twice a year, that is a paper newsletter where there are photos in it. That we were sort of thinking in that very limited way that the policy as it was written was basically saying you can't even have those pictures. And so then what's the point of why are you telling parents that they can opt out of having their children's pictures in those publications if your policy says actually you can't put any pictures anywhere. So I think that based on the conversations today, I feel like this wording is vague. Certainly the first woman that came up and then asked me that question, that probably what we should be saying here is that district posting of photographs or video without, on the district website, I mean, to very specifically list those few places that are sort of the board's newsletter, that sort of thing, without, it should have to be consistent with the opt-out policy, meaning that if a parent doesn't even want their child's picture on our website, then we wouldn't put it there. And that my feeling is the same as yours, that in terms of other social media, I would like to understand in more detail what teachers are doing, what the schools are doing, and that I feel like until that was not what in policy committee we were really addressing. We were talking about the basics, like
that
the
would be very
website.
accurate.
And that
Yeah,
if-
that's it, that's accurate.
And so now I'm understanding why people felt that we were changing an existing policy
Yeah.
by opening the floodgates to say that people could be posting to Twitter, to Facebook, to everything under the sun, because our wording here, and this is why it's a first read and not a second read, is that what we were really trying to aim at was stuff like the website. And then I feel like since we haven't addressed the other stuff, and I think it's much more complicated, that I agree with you that we should probably say right now we shouldn't be doing any of that other stuff because we don't have a policy to address it. Also, our opt-out form really isn't addressing it. And I'm very concerned about our ability, if you start getting very detailed, are you opting into this, opting out of that, opting into this, opting out of that? Is it
Can't
really
manage it. You can't manage it.
possible to do? I just can't, it's hard enough in the old days before you had the internet, where the only thing you're trying to manage is whether you're putting a child's picture in the enterprise or in the school newspaper, or is it okay for their picture to be in the yearbook? Like, that's a very limited number of things, and the yearbook advisor can look at all those forms and see, okay, these are the kids whose pictures can't go in there. But in the world we're in now, where there's a million different places, start saying, well, I don't mind my kid, I think that's a much bigger conversation, because it has to also take into account what's possible to do. And there may be some things that we as a district decide, what, we can't do simply because it's too difficult to administer. To say, well, it's okay for this kid's picture to be, on somebody's Facebook page, but not that. Like, there was one parent who said she had opted out and yet then still saw her children's pictures, I think, on our website. So that's hard enough to make sure you're doing correctly. I think to sort of break it into a million different pieces, I don't see how, you'd need like an entire department of people sitting there, figuring out whether that's all possible. So my feeling would be that in the short term, maybe the thing is to clarify this sentence, to make it clear that the opt-out form is to if the parent has not opted out, the child's picture can be put on our website, and we can discuss whether there are any things other than just the website. And then to add another sentence that is that any other, use of the child's picture is prohibited. And then it gives us the time to have a hearing and to get more input from the public and figure out what is possible and what we'd like to do to make it more broad. But I feel like to make, until we do, I just think we need to close the loophole, until we decide if we want to ease it up at all, because I think you ease it a little bit and you run the risk of something like that one woman had, where she signed the opt-out form and the stuff's getting through. And unless we have the right procedures in place, and I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself, so I will stop.
We don't normally do the back and forth, but if it's important, feel free. No, we sometimes we get a little loose with protocol. This is if you something feels particularly important, feel free, and if not,
I think there might have been a feeling in the community and I'm not saying whether it was accurate or not, but I think there was a feeling of, oh my God, the Board of Education wants to suddenly blast our kids' pictures all over the social media, and you know, and so I think what might be helpful for you guys, because I think everything you're talking about has to happen. So I think if there was some sort of statement or communication with the community at large, letting us know that, hey guys, we're not moving forward on anything, and we have transparency, and we want to be as thorough as possible. You know what I'm saying? That
Yes.
would be reassuring, I think, to the community at large.
Thank you. I'll recognize Jennifer, and then we'll go back to.
I understand what you were saying, but I think part of the reason this came to the fore was because it was already happening. Like the first day of school was being live tweeted practically. Photos are ending up on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and this is why I became interested in this issue in the first place. I didn't know that was going on. I don't know if it was going on under the prior superintendent, and I just wasn't aware of it, or if this is a new thing. I know that Tony, that you are very into social media and the use of social media and branding and all this other stuff, and that's fantastic for you. But I think the reason I freaked out, or at least I did, I wasn't freaked out, but why I was concerned was that these pictures were appearing. One after another of the school building, of the classrooms, of teachers, of all these other kinds of things. And that is why there was this, in my opinion,
You know, it's interesting.
we're talking about something prospective. This is something that already has happened. It's already happening. That's why I began.
If I could just, because Jennifer, you and I did speak, and I heard everything that you shared, and I think I was trying to be incredibly responsive to everything that you brought up as it related to, and I did. I had everything taken down, but only because you brought up a perspective that was even new to me in terms of the conversations that I had prior to, starting the school year. So as this policy stood, also just to clarify, because I think the feeling might be that, the social media superintendent is telling everyone to do this, which has not been the case at all. We haven't, in fact, had any conversations at the building levels about social media. So I couldn't even necessarily tell you right now which teachers are using social media or not. Certainly something we can find out, and we will find out. But as soon as feedback was given to me about some of those concerns, I tried to be incredibly responsive to them, right? So not identifying kids. But district policy was already being violated. And actually, I'm the one that brought, just so you know, because it is incredibly concerning to me to be aligned with what our community values, to protect our kids and make sure that they're safe. The question about the policy was one that I brought to the table because it was not consistent with practice before I got here. So take me out of the equation, whether the other whether Dr. Montesano was using social media or not. Other people were, I think. I don't have 100% clarity as to what was going on, but I know it was happening because I did some research on the district before I started working here. Then I saw the policy the day that you called, because I was unaware of that. When I saw the literal, you cannot post anything on the internet and no pictures can be shared via email, I was like, wait a second, this is not what's happening. Again, not about me and my practice, but about what was going on in the district. And so I think it's important that everyone knows that this was something that was not trying to change policy and be like, okay, you don't have a say in this, we're going to do this on some shady side deal. Not at all. In fact, this was trying to mitigate what is a disconnect between practice and policy, and then engage in a broader conversation around this. I know Ann and I talked about this particularly because this is important to me. And in fact, I think during one of our conversations, we were like, do we have a menu of opt into this and opt out of that? I don't know. And so this is one, conversation that for sure has been a priority. But at the point we were at, it was clear to me that there was a disconnect between policy and practice. Again, taking me out of the equation, and I admit to the mistakes that I made, and I tried to correct them and learn from them. But then there are other people who I don't know everyone's usage or not, because it has not been some sort of forefront issue that's out there on social media. It's not been the case. And it's led to some really, even Janine and I have engaged in conversations about should this go on the website, should it not go on the website, should it go on the Facebook page or not go on Facebook? So it at the very least was trying to mitigate that disconnect. Because I don't want a teacher to be I don't think any teacher would be consciously like, oh, forget the policy, I'm going to go do whatever I want. So I think that policy was unaware to most of well, not to most, to some of our staff. And so that's kind of where it came from. I just, to follow up. And your phone calls serve very much as an important point of information to start that conversation. So,
And
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
I was going to say, I think to follow up on the history, since I was receiving, I remember you and I spoke on the first day of school, and you showed me that there were, I think, 30 pictures of children, and then checked the policy, and then I spoke to you, and you all spoke. I think what's happened is there was a policy that said no pictures, and it had been violated over the past several years. But I think what happened is then the community felt a change in the level of activity of the online use. So up until, and again, this is not to put things on you, but that's where the change happened. Okay. Our internet, our online presence was through a website, which at least to what I would see for the most part was sporting events, national merit, was not so much the daily practices of what's going on in the classroom. And our social media presence was really minimal. All I knew was we had a district Facebook page, which was not utilized that much, and there was a Hillside Twitter feed. But I just recall being at a meeting with Fareed where people were like, there's a Hillside Twitter feed, so very, very, minimally used. And then there was a large uptick. And again, I think on our board, I think some of us are social media users more than others, so I think it may have come across some of our radar more. And while I'm speaking, I made a number of notes. I'll just go through them if that's okay with everybody. One, the point about the mom in the back whose child's picture was posted despite the opt-out form. We do make mistakes, but we have to make sure they're minimized, so I think that's something we need to, act on right away to make sure that is properly dealt with. I very much support a survey. I like that because the people who can't physically get here and who aren't fortunate to have Melanie come and read something, their voices can be heard as well. And we can follow up as a board with the PTSD about, who can start it, and thank you for that offer. I also support a hearing. I think what we heard today was really helpful, and I'd like to hear it more. One item that I didn't hear that the PTSA did raise that I reacted to is what cameras are we using to take pictures? I see Janine goes around with her Nikon, which I feel good about, but then other people take pictures on their cell phones. And if I take a picture on my cell phone of children, I go home with pictures of children on my cell phone. And as a parent, I don't really want staff having I love staff, but if you think about it this way, what if a teacher came in and took 100 pictures and then brought them all home? Some of us may have issues with that, so I think that should be part of our conversation as we go forward. What pictures? There's also questions of security and storage. I may be particularly sensitive to it because my husband's phone was recently hacked. And the company we're working with said the first thing they go for is pictures. Luckily, we're fine on that front, but the next thing is the contact list. But anyway, these things are quite vulnerable. We know because we've just been attacked on it. The current policy, and Donna, you were raising this, and this was a good point. Tony and I spoke when this was just happening, and we couldn't change the policy on day one. So I said, and I should have put it out to the board, so my apologies, is that we'll hold off on enforcement unless somebody comes to us and we have to deal. So we would hold off up until this point when we address it. But I think that is something, depending on how long this process is going to take, do we want to put moratoriums on certain actions? That's something that we need to talk about. Another thing that I didn't hear come up is our district website. There seems to be a feeling of comfort around that, but I would throw out the idea of, do we want it to be password protected when we have photos on there? When my children go to sleepaway camp and I want to see their pictures, I have to put in my special password. So that's something else to put out. It could be on a survey. Melanie raised this on behalf of Doug Rushkoff, and Tim talked about this also. And I think it's a really important point, and that's the why. What does a heavy presence online, why are we doing it? What does it gain for us? And then, of course, we have to balance that against the rest of it. But I think that needs to be articulated, and I don't think we've heard that yet. And then I think, I may be repetitive, so forgive me, somebody mentioned bringing the current policy in line with our usage, and I think that's the point that Jennifer was making, is that the practice has changed, and I think you were dovetailing on that. The practice up until June, compared there to now, is different. There's a much, much greater online presence, so I don't know that we can bring something in line with our practice when our practice is evolving at a very quick speed.
But I
And I'm done.
think the piece of the practice we're trying to bring online is to be able to post. That's what I'm saying. I think that our terminology here is too vague, because I think what we were concerned about in policy committee was being able to use pictures of our kids on the website.
And limit to the website.
Right, and so I think having this say internet or email perhaps is the problem. I think the policy the practice and policy we're trying to bring together is that right now the policy is saying we can't have any pictures even on our website.
Website and physical periodicals, right? So the school paper.
Right. Because right now it's saying we can't have
periodicals in print.
Yeah, we can't have pictures of our children anywhere at all.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we want to go to that extreme. I think we want to be able to do it in periodicals and on the website. And that's the practice that we're trying to bring in line with the policy. Potentially, that's why I was saying that potentially anything beyond that, maybe we want to say no to until we have a hearing and we decide what we want the policy to be about other things.
But my concern is that we start doing piecemealish changes, and then we're going to start having communication issues out to the public, because that sentence will be changed. And, oh, did they change the policy now, or they didn't? I mean, if we can get it done, if it's going to take us till March, I think that's a good idea. But if we can get it done in fairly short order and we can think through this, I would love to make it clean with one fell swoop. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but this trickle out new policy thing, I think, it could confuse the message, I think, a little bit.
My own, it's not that complicated.
Well, it's not for everyone here.
Two parts.
It's not for everyone here, but as soon as it goes out the door, I think it gets complicated.
I think physical periodicals and the website, and then whether the website's password protected or not is a separate issue, but being able to demonstrate some level of activity throughout our district on the primary source of information, which is our website, seems like we want to be able to do that. And right now, we have two choices. We can either leave the policy as it stands and continue to do what we've been doing, which is just, we're doing something that's outside of what we say we accept. And if we're okay with just kind of going with that until we get a final, then okay, I'm fine with that. If you want to make a minor, the minor tweak, but very narrow scope, so that it's consistent with, and in the process, really exclude this area, which is, I think, really troubling, and we need to get our arms around meaningfully. And I don't think it's actually that hard to communicate to the community that says, we acknowledge that social media is really complicated, and we are, and I'm speaking for myself, so, and we'll have to decide as a board whether we can all coalesce around this or not, but I agree that it's super complicated, what goes in social media, who posts it in social media, who is it under? Is it on the school's Facebook page? Is it on a teacher's page, et cetera? And if we draw a line down that and say, I'm okay with this moratorium concept, and say, we'll address it through a public, through a public hearing, and come up with a solution around it. So that's my take.
I want to throw one piece out. With the website, I guess my question is, would the website be utilized the way it was pre-July, or would there be like daily postings of pictures inside classrooms? Before that, it really was not used in that way. Again, it was more celebratory, great things that Parker and Elliott have done, as opposed to activities happening within the classroom, because I have heard concerns about that. So that could be a change in policy. So I guess I'm just going to lay out a few things that I think we need to decide. But wait, and then let me recognize you. But let me just say, I think what we need to accomplish today is to decide: do we want a survey? Do we want a hearing? And in the interim between now and, well, I guess, do we want a moratorium, or do we like the one step? I'm trying to boil it down to a few, and it keeps growing.
Lisa, I think my concern with what Doug said about that he thought we could do this fairly quickly, just
I don't
based
think
on.
it'll be quick.
I don't think it's going to be quick. I
It's not
think
gonna
that
be quick.
based on policies that we've had to alter in the past, if you think about the fact that we want to have a public hearing, a survey, that we potentially will need to run things by the school district attorney, that we will need to talk to whoever in our staff would actually have to implement the policy to make sure that if you're allowing some things and not others, that it's actually doable for them to do that. It could take months. I mean, also because we don't work here 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, so when you think about the frequency with which our committee can get back together and absorb that information, the fact that December is holiday season, I'm not convinced that having a public hearing, I just feel like if we did the public hearing, in the couple of weeks leading up to the holidays, a lot of people that might want to attend might not be able to. I just don't know. It could take us 3 or 4 months to figure all this out. And it sounds like there's something going on right now this year with the amount of, kids' pictures being out there that has gone beyond what had.
Can I ask an operational question, which is, we're taking pictures off, but the content that goes out around what's going on in the schools, into social media, without X pictures, could still continue.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right.
I mean, you can look at other district websites. They don't have tons of pictures of kids. I mean, it's not necessary by any stretch. So, I'm kind of on that end, like, let's just not do pictures. I mean, go to some of their buildings.
Yeah, we have content.
The backs, the most you get are the backs of kids' heads. So I don't think it's a hard thing to just say.
No, it's not,
So we could.
I think we should do a survey. I think we should do the hearing. But I also think it's a good idea, based on the information we've already gotten, try to start to look at, with the lawyers, what can we come up with as a policy? Because I think it's very helpful for people to have things to react to and say, I agree with that, I don't agree with this. And for us, we don't want to offer something where, the opt-out policies have been in place, I don't know, for a dozen years. And the question is, if you make it an opt-in policy, which I always thought kind of was a good idea, because sometimes people don't notice the form.
Book of the Month Club, they call it.
So it's, it's a little bit. But if you allow for a review of how, logistically, what's reasonable, then, particularly because things have changed, I think it's easy. You stop social media use right now for the teachers, that's offline, and then we go ahead with scheduling something, and it probably will be in January. It just gets tough because we could try something in December. We could send out a survey with an end date in January, and then schedule the hearing for the middle of January. By that time, we should be able to talk with the attorneys, whatever, and get some background information, maybe get something going as a policy.
And we could, just so I'm clear though, am I hearing, because I'm trying to, the immediate question is moratorium on all photos on social media? Is that what I'm hearing collectively?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, I am too.
I just have to interject for a minute, because I handle it all. We also have a district app that is used by quite a few people, and everything I post to the website is streamed onto the district app that people do utilize. So if I shut down all photos, I have to close down our Facebook account. I can close down the Facebook account and wipe it out. But then it also is going to affect the app. It's also going to affect the PTSA and booster clubs who reuse my information that I post on the district website, whether it's on my website. PTSA is a big user of Facebook, and so are some of our other organizations. So that means they can't use any photos either from our website. How are we going to control that? There are a lot of pieces, a lot of variables that need to come into content.
We don't use your photos. We don't do the photos.
Oh, you stopped? Because they were being used.
Well, maybe they were at one point, but they
Yeah, so that I wasn't aware of. But so those kind of things.
So there are implications with the app. Okay.
That have to be looked at when we make this decision. And there's no problem with doing it, but understand the repercussions of what will happen once we do that.
Could I also? Elliot? Wait, Elliot's been trying for a while.
If we wanted to do a moratorium, the board's medium for it doing this is through policy.
But I thought you were saying the way you read the policy, it doesn't allow for social media use.
It doesn't allow for any photos.
It doesn't allow for any photos
in any venue.
The current policy.
Right, but I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you were saying when you read it that you were reading it just in terms of the website and that there was no policy allowing a social media. I guess what I'm trying to find, because I thought that language would let us do the moratorium.
Well, that would, if the current language about changing the policy at all means that we have to pull every photo off the internet, off the website right now. If that's the moratorium you want to not even.
Well, it could be going forward, I think we could.
I thought it was a moratorium on
Just as a practice,
teachers.
for the next 6 months and balance of school
Great.
year, we're not going to do it.
Great.
And that's just a
Great.
practice. It doesn't have to be a policy. It's just something that they agree on in the school, and then that's it.
Great.
You know, and then that way, until we understand how we want to use it and what it's for, and have that conversation with teachers, like, what are you getting out of it? Because I think that's the other end of it is, if that is being used, maybe some teachers are using it to meet with, reach out to the parents and things like that.
That's the Doug Rushkoff question, the why.
Right, and I think, that's not really the board having that conversation, that's a within each building kind of conversation. What are we doing with this, and does it make sense?
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in for a little bit, just because I wanted to say a couple of things. I mean, I think it's, in listening to all of this, I mean, I absolutely, I think that this is an extraordinarily important conversation. But I also think, I'm thinking back, and I'm thinking that, one of the reasons I think that so many of us, wanted you here, Tony, was because we loved your ability to communicate, whether it's interpersonally or in other forums. And I think that's something that, when it was surveyed last year, was something that a lot of people felt was missing. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's important to say that. I think, while this is something that needs to be addressed, I think the community needs to weigh in on it. I would like to see the teachers weigh in on it, because there is educational value in technology. And while a lot of this discussion is based on social media, what is also getting sort of swooped into all of this is also, how is technology being used? So if you're talking about using technology in the classroom, well, there could be real, pedagogical, strategies and methods that you're using that would require a photograph, which goes back to, what are you using it? Are you taking it on your iPhone or on a district phone? I feel like this is a conversation that is just so huge and so big. And I think that, it's important not to lose sight of the fact that at some level, this community was asking for more communication. And that maybe we just need to rethink how that communication is delivered. And I'm not saying social media, not social media, technology, not technology, but I'm saying that I think the community wanted more engagement. And I think that there is some sort of value in technology, and it's just figuring out a way for us to do it as a community in terms of the school culture, and also respecting what families and parents are most comfortable with. And it's sort of like finding that sweet spot. And I don't know, I just felt like I had to say that.
Elliot's been waiting for a long time.
So I guess this is kind of following up, and you mentioned that we didn't yet address what the actual purpose, goal of having Facebook or Instagram. What do you feel is the ultimate goal, and do you feel that it's working? I don't mean as an aggressive question. I mean, there's
I would never take anything from you aggressively. I think ultimately for me it starts around community engagement and giving our families an understanding of not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And so, and part of that comes from what I understood the community was looking for in more engagement from their superintendent. So that's the starting point for me, right? And I think there's one thing when you look at community involvement, and then there's another thing when you look at engagement. And to me, engagement also involves learning and involves understanding pedagogical, thinking. Not that every family member is necessarily interested in that, but understand that we might value small group instruction, right? We might value collaborative groups, and I've seen those in your classroom and in your classroom, and so that is a research-based approach to instruction, to delivering information, and I think what I have found in my experience using social media to engage families is that it has demystified what people think is happening and given people access to what is happening. So I could tell you that sort of, and I don't know if that answers your question, Elliot, but that was sort of the starting point for me around this work here in Hastings. So it really kind of did come from what I perceived as a lack of engagement to looking for engagement. And so I think like any human being would do, you rely on things that have worked in the past. This has worked for me in different educational institutions in the past. So that's kind of where it started. I don't know if that helps. But I do think, to your point, Christina, there is certainly a lane that we can find that works for everyone. I don't think there's a right or wrong necessarily. I don't think there's a way to make everyone happy. I think there are issues with opt-in versus opt-out about anything, any opt-in or opt-out, whether it's like going on a field trip or so that's something to think about, and that's fine. That those implications can be discussed. As to what the why is, I think we can have many discussions, and I very much am familiar with Mr. Rushkoff's work, and was thrilled to know that he's a community member in our community to be able to engage him around conversations. I did my whole dissertation around social media, and specifically around virtual communities of practice, and how they mitigate barriers and allow people to connect and network in a different kind of way. So part of my work is rooted in that. So we can talk about that at another time. But also understanding that my job is to serve our community and to have a sense of where our community is. And so when there were questions about social media usage, and by the way, there are people on the other end of the conversation who are, very sort of positively welcoming that level of engagement or that type of engagement. So I've been trying to be mindful of that, to your point, Tim. So it might not be a picture one day, or it might just be the picture of a book cover as opposed to, what I saw in action. So I'm certainly refining my process as I go through this to be responsive and respectful of our community and our families, while being mindful of the entire spectrum of feedback around this particular issue. And certainly, while I apologize for upsetting the apple cart, if that's what my practice did, I'm happy that we brought to the surface in a conversation that we needed to have, and one that precedes me from what I understand in terms of some of the concerns around this work. So I welcome the conversation. I do think we need to be mindful of how we structure the conversation so that it is a productive and beneficial discussion that leads to actionable work. And I don't mean that as pro or con. I just mean like what does the structure of the discussion look like? I'm not quite sure what a hearing looks like here in Hastings, but I'd like to know that there is some structure to that type of event, that type of gathering, so it doesn't become, I don't want it to be contentious or divisive for our community either, so that it might be more useful to do small groups in a community forum and jigsaw. There's so many ways to go about it, but to me that's I want to use this as an opportunity to build community in a positive way and to learn from each other, and not view it as, the people who are for it are over here and the people who are against it over here. To your point, Doug, I think of trying to find the middle point, whatever that is. So that's my take on it.
Is it possible to get our attorneys to look at other districts and what kinds of opt-out and opt-in forms they're using, if they can share it with us?
So actually, I did try to organize an opt-out form for our district, but I didn't realize it until August. I was trying to work with the principals to develop a uniform opt-out based on language that I saw in other places and that I ran by Stephanie. But by the time we got it together, it was like second week of August, and people had already sent, packets.
Yeah, the packets go out like at the end of July.
So it was too late, and again, the form was there. The letters were there. So it was kind of, that was the first, red flag, like, wait a second, we have different letters. Because I know districts that do like a letter with your registration packet, and it stays on file with your child, and just every year you kind of get a message if you want to change your opt-in or opt-out, or, just FYI, not that necessarily the letter goes home every year or whatever. But, and again, that doesn't necessarily, I'm not suggesting that's what we do, but I'm saying I've seen it in different ways, so I was kind of surprised that the letter was different in each school. But that's something we can work on for sure. So.
I'm going to say, because the hour is getting late, if anybody has any, more pressing concerns, Okay, so just to sum up where we're at, I love the idea of a communication to the community, and I think we have a lot, so I think we can do that. So I think we like the idea of a survey. We'll reach out to the PTSA and figure out who has the manpower to do that right now. I think everybody also likes the idea of a hearing, and we'll figure out the format of that and the date. We'll include that. The one thing that I don't know that we've come to a firm decision on is, say, from between now and, let's say, 6 months from now, the issue of posting pictures, and I'm going to separate into two categories, the website and then social media. And by social media, I'll be very specific. Anything, including our Hastings USFD, or teachers or staff or whoever on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm not aware of any other social media platforms that we're on. Are we on any others?
Aware.
Okay, so.
They could use it on their own. They should get one.
No, but this is the posting of photos. So not just, right, on somebody's own, again, if there's a photo of a child from here, I think we were talking about, should we put a moratorium on the use of the posting of any photos of students on any social media? I think I phrased that correctly? Yeah. And I would support that at this point.
And the taking of pictures.
No, what does that mean?
With a phone.
Oh, and that picture should just be taken on a district.
You're talking about by a staff member.
Yeah, not by
Right, by a staff member. We can't control what you do. Or a parent. So right, then there's the question of camera. But let's just be specific. So do we want to say right now, no posting of photos on social media being Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram? And we'll put that on a little bit indefinite.
Photos of people. You can put photos up. That's not photos of people.
I wouldn't specify which platforms because I don't know. I don't know if someone's using Snapchat. I have no idea. I'm not, but I don't know.
You're right.
So let's bring this to ground. We're getting close.
Okay.
We'll work through this.
Okay, and wait, and the website, we're still okay with the website. In the meantime, we're okay with the website. And then the last thing is the camera.
The website and communications that come directly from the district. So the Hastings Happenings newsletter is an extension of the website. Like basically district created electronic communication is okay. Like we create that content, we distribute it to community members. Social media is a much broader network of which we have no control. That to me is the delineation.
So it's the website and district-generated email is kind of one category. Social media is a different category.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I personally would still be more comfortable rewriting this paragraph to say that we can do the website and district emails and not do any other post, the district should not be posting photos on any social media or any other. Yeah.
But what about what Eileen said, that we could just say for the next X months, we could do that without changing the policy?
The problem to me of not changing the policy.
I'm hearing different things from both of you. That's where I'm struggling.
The problem to me with not changing the policy is that we are right now, by even having Janine send out an e-blast or having someone's picture on the website, we're going against the policy. And some
we're doing it
parent that's not
knowingly.
happy
We're doing
with
it
that,
knowingly now.
and we're doing it knowingly, and some parent who's not happy with that could take us to the state education commissioner about that. So if that's not really what we want, that we don't want to pull our photos off our website, that we want Janine to be able to send something out about the school play that has a photo of all the kids that are in it, then I feel that and given that it could take us 4 to 6 months to come up with what else we're okay with doing, I think that we should state in the policy that we're okay with that.
So we would have a policy that says it's okay for the website, and then we'd have an agreement that says no social media for the next X months. And then I think you two are consistent.
Could we say no social media until
in the policy?
Just in the policy, and then when we decide
it's just the internet in the policy.
Yeah, the policy will change again in 6 months.
Exactly, and then when we change the policy in 6 months, then it's changed in 6 months. At least we're not putting a timeline on ourselves. What if it takes 7 months? What if it takes 8 months? So we have to.
Through policy, we'll codify that we're going to take photographs, social media. Photographs will not go on social media. And then if we get through this very quickly in 4 months and we want to rewrite a policy at that point, we'll do it. If this takes 7 months.
Okay. So the policy, we're going to rewrite it again. We'll look at it. It's going to say yes to the website, no to social media. And then the last thing that we should just quickly mention is the cameras in this sort of interim time. Do we want to limit it just to district cameras, be it a district authorized cell phone? And, well, although that gets a little dicey because teachers, if people get their, maybe just have it a Janine camera.
As a teacher, I just have to chime in on this one. If we decide, because I do it for educational purposes, and, until my school district tells me otherwise, you're calling right now.
He's probably watching.
Yes, he is.
Everything else
All right, we got that on Mitchell now.
When you take pictures, they're for use in your classroom or you post them?
No, they're used for in my classroom. So like we're going to be doing something on colonial statues. And we will take pictures of students as statues. And then they will be posted up and students can like make comments and write on them and whatnot. So like, I guess my point is, if I'm told as a teacher, you cannot use your phone, okay, now I have to find a district camera. And I can tell you, before the iPhone, there was one camera for the middle school and the high school, or maybe two, and one was always broken. So like, we would have to really make sure that our teachers were supported so that it doesn't impact their ability to, with instruction.
Okay, so we need to address that piece of this.
I think you capture it by saying no photos on social media, right? Like.
Not that you have a photo in the class.
Right.
That should reduce the number of photos
We have to
taken.
trust the judgment of our teaching staff to a certain degree, but just so long as we say social media is out.
Can I volunteer to rewrite this paragraph in a way that takes all this into account? And I'll forward it to the board, and we can, when is our next meeting?
December 11th. We can look at it
We
then.
can look at it, and if it is as limiting as we are all saying we want it to be, then we can decide, if we want to do that now as that interim step.
And it serves, and ideally it serves the basis as this public discussion. Right, like it's a step from where we are now to a step I think will be in the right direction, and taking that piece that's a step in the right direction with whatever the right framing is for a public discussion hearing, whatever we want to call it. But it's sort of integral in terms of we're moving in this direction. Are we as a community where we want to get to? Do we want to get further, et cetera?
Okay, well, I think we're there.
I think we got,
And in the meantime, though, we will
Great.
hold off on social media, even though it's
Thank
not
you
drafted.
for
Okay.
offering to do that.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
thank you to everybody. This is really complex. Thank you to our participants, our participants who communicate through somebody else. Thank you to everybody for all the thought. Thank you for Tony, because I know this is, you've written books on this.
I'm
and I know
excited
this must be
to have the
difficult.
conversation. This is great. No, seriously.
It's good. It's good. It really is.
It's not many people having the discussion, and so.
I actually think we're probably at the forefront of it.
I think we are
I think
too.
most
To
districts,
our
if they
credit.
haven't grappled with this yet, they're going to.
They will.
So we will take down Facebook.
But just stop posting on it, I would say, at this.
No, I think it can,
As
I
long
mean.
as you just pause, because
yeah.
I don't
I
think
think it's an
it can be
important point to raise. It's not social media that the problem is. It's
just
the
image.
pictures on
Just the
social
image,
media.
Like, I was going to even say that. Like, if there's something happening that's quite meaningful, there's not anything wrong with a stock, like a yellow jacket or a blue ribbon logo.
It doesn't get as many clicks. That's the problem.
Or even an
I think that's the
announcement,
real
senior
issue, right?
citizens,
That's
come
why
to
it's
our-
done.
Come to our student
Oh, it
conference.
doesn't get clicks.
Okay,
No.
but guys, I am going to move us along if we can, because it is 20 to 10, okay? All right. Okay, moving right along. And I will say, if anybody, don't feel like you're being rude if you need to leave. Thank you all again. Your comments were really, really helpful. Okay.
I never thought about it. I'm like, shit, man.
Doug's letter?
Yes, but I think Melanie left.
I can forward it to her.
Okay. Okay. All right, our business items. Let me just see. Is there anything that we need to pull out or can we proceed as a consent agenda? Okay, so let's do the business items and the CSE and CPSE together. They are under business. May I have a motion to approve all of these items?
So moved.
And a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Personnel, now we did the tenure.
We did tenure, but that was B. So you have to do A.
We have to do A.
Which is appointments of some coverage related to a leave one of our teachers, and then also permanent subs, per diem subs, people put on. So.
Okay.
So we didn't do all the tenure.
Yeah, you didn't.
No, we're going to go, that's B. We're going to go there, yeah.
Okay, so may I have a motion?
Sorry.
Which Joanne McGrath is it?
The English.
The English, right.
Right. There's one with an E and one
British
without
one.
an E. I know.
No.
Say Joanne LA and Joanne.
Yeah.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve everything under personnel? Even what we've already approved?
No, except
for
no,
the
do
te-
A first, and then we, oh, yeah, okay, that's the way to do it, yes. Yeah,
Right?
sorry, yeah, to approve everything.
To approve everything that we didn't approve
Yes.
earlier on the tenure appointments. May I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, and a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Did that include our leaves and absences? I think it did.
Yes,
Okay.
that's C in there.
Okay, minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 27th Board of Ed meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, committee reports. Policy. Do you want a break? Do you want to be moved to the end?
Well, it's very quick. We had a very abbreviated meeting tonight.
Yeah.
Because we got the first policy installment from NYSBA for this year. There were 5 policies on it, 2 of which our language and theirs are almost identical. We are going to put those, Christine and I reviewed the changes. We're going to put those up for first read so everyone can look at those. The other 3, Tony has homework because one of them he needs to review with Maureen regarding investments. One of them he needs to review with the special ed department and possibly our lawyers. And the third one he needs to review.
Was that the PD one?
Yeah, the
with all
professional development.
Principals and.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 of them need our policies. The language overlaps with NYSBA's language, but they're not really the same policy, and there's really a lot that's specific to our district that has to be reviewed before we could move ahead with any of the changes they're recommending on those 3.
And I can tell you with the professional development, we're already in line with that, so it may not reflect in our policy, but we know about the change in the CTLE hours, and so,
Okay.
yeah, but it's fine.
That's great.
That's all.
Okay, next policy is DIESEL RISE, and just for anybody listening, DIESEL stands for Diversity, Social, Emotional Learning, and that is a school committee, and Hastings RISE is a village community organization, and RISE stands for Racial Inclusion and Social Equity. And what we did this year is Hastings RISE had reached out, and we had a joint meeting with DIESEL and RISE. And I will thank in advance Karen Hammerness, who had reached out, and she...
We had it on October 25th or 26th. It was 7:30 in the morning, and we have another meeting coming up on December 13th, also 7:30 in the morning.
And I was supposed to find out more information, and I didn't, so would you like, I can share...
About the, oh, no, I'm
that
happy to
meeting,
share.
or you can feel
Yeah,
free.
no, thank you.
But I do want to thank Karen Hammerness, because she led the meeting, and she really did a lot of the coordinating,
She reached out,
and she was terrific.
Yeah, she facilitated it. I thought it was a very productive and useful conversation. We got a lot of people in the room together who were kind of talking about the same things, but I think prior to that meeting, we're talking about them in different places. And so we talked about the sort of framing for the meeting was around the suggestions from the Race Matters Committee that they presented last year, framing the anchor for the meeting. And so we talked about some of the curricular pieces that are in place. And Eileen, you were there too, Doug and Lisa were there. Yeah. So we talked about some of the things that are already in place, like courageous conversations, the integration of literature that is, more inclusive, looking at videos being used with our staff, like TED Talks and during professional development and faculty meetings. We also talked about some things that we want to be working on. So I know the elementary teachers are already working on developing sparks, which are like conversation starters around race and racism. And then we are going to be looking at like a Facing Ourselves light course, which we're kind of building up on the middle school courageous conversation courses. And we talked about the PD that's coming up on Monday with Dr. Gay around cultural competency and diversity. So that was some of the stuff that we looked at. We talked about a district protocol around handling incidents of bias and hate. And Lou, ADPHO, and Gail Kipper and Amy Kazis were going to with another person, Martha
Polstein.
Yeah, Polstein. Sorry. We're going to work something through and use different resources.
And they mentioned specifically teaching tolerance.
Right, that was the resource that they looked at. They were going to look at some other materials to see just how consistent what's being presented there is. So I'm hopeful to have an update on December 13th of what was developed from that. We also talked about supporting our teachers of color and how we can ensure that they feel supported in our district, to make sure that our teachers are, that we can not only diversify our staff, but also retain our teachers, across different subgroups, different groups of people, right? And so we talked about that. We talked about possibly developing affinity groups as well, and that was also something that came up recently at the Race Matters committee meeting just last week. Affinity groups with kids, but also affinity groups with our teachers. And so what would that look like potentially? So that's continuing discussion, and that's pretty much where we left off. And just so you know, that on our December 13th meeting, I also extended an invite to the PTSA inclusion working group, or working inclusion.
PTSA inclusion working group.
Yes. So 2 or 3 of the people on that committee, I think, were already, or well, at least definitely one of them was already coming to this joint Rise Diesel meeting. So they're going to be part of the conversation again, just so that everyone who's doing this work, we can kind of put our efforts behind one focal point and kind of go from there. So,
great.
Sorry. So that's what I have for Diesel Rise / PTSA.
Okay, the next committee report, Finance. Who would like to present on behalf of Finance?
I can say something.
Sure.
I mean, I think we were all there, so.
We had a little finance party.
It's a pre-party.
I think what we're, this is about the third cut of another draft budget that Maureen and Tony put together, and I think continuing to lay out a variety of different options and getting the budget to a place where it's in a comfortable place where we want to start the conversation with the community. I mean, I'm feeling good about that, and I think we have had a lot of substantive conversations about a variety of different places to bring the line in line with the tax cap. So that conversation is moving along. We started the conversation. I think the next meeting of focus is going to be a community engagement strategy. What does that look like? How do we do that in an effective way? Which, Steve is no longer here, but the point Steve was bringing up. I mean, I will just say that one thought that crossed my mind is this conversation around social media and whatnot brought to the fore that these can be very educative sessions for people. So I would hope we can, find a way, if there was a Doug Rushkoff of finance, maybe, to be able to articulate some of the things facing public school districts. But, a good meeting, and I think we're looking forward to engaging the rest of the community.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And then the last one we have is facilities, and we could do a little round robin on that. Donna, do you want to read off the headings?
Sure.
And then we can all contribute.
Our meeting was on November 14th, and the first thing we talked about were space issues at Hillside due to the number of classrooms that are being used and the number of different specials there are, and what we might, different sort of ideas on how to address that in the future.
Right, and we had one pressing issue about music lessons, but that sounds like it got resolved in the sharing of space between 2 music teachers in advance of school. So that issue is off the table, I think, right now.
Of the space.
Of this space for this year.
Not the instrument.
No, not the instruments. And I do just want to throw out, because I know I've heard among Hillside parents, they've said, we have more students than we've ever had. And just to put out there that that's actually not true. In the early 2000s, we probably had about 20-ish more. That said, there are other reasons for the space issues, but Maureen supplied to us the map of Hillside and how it's being used, so we can analyze going forward. But luckily, this one got resolved, so thank you, and thank everybody involved in taking that off the table.
Number 2 was the Hastings Education Foundation have given a $48,000 grant for updates to the stage at Hillside in the multipurpose room, and that the current set of ideas about how to improve the stage are currently running up to potentially as much as $60,000. So if we wanted to implement all of them, it would be more than the amount of the grant, and as a district, we might have to put something in the budget unless we decide to have them cut back on what it is they would like to do with the stage.
And we could also ask them for more money, but I don't know whether they would.
They're starting a fundraising campaign, if I'm not mistaken, HEF, specific to, or I think they're looking at different ways to raise money so that people can contribute to a specific project.
Oh.
I know I just shot a video
That's
with them. And I think it's not, I didn't put it on social media. I know I shot a video with a couple of our parents. So, but they are launching a website, if I'm not mistaken.
Great.
And they're looking at, like I said, to modify fundraising so people can contribute to projects as opposed to.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Actually, I think it's called hashtag. I don't know, something go. I don't know.
And
Something.
we're also going to see if some other people in the community,
Right.
you could also pull them in prior to making any more purchasing decisions.
Yes.
To see if there were some
Right,
other
right, right.
Yes.
ideas that may be more cost effective
Yeah.
that we're not currently.
Then the next thing we talked about was potentially facilities bond planning.
Right, and because what we've learned is, and Maureen's been educating us, that when we did our last bond, it had actually been quite some time in between two bonds, and I think we kind of skipped one because the economy had tanked. And most districts do bonds, every several years. And the reason to do the bond is it saves us as taxpayers money. We don't have to explain why, but for every dollar the state lends us, we pay back only 58 cents.
So we borrow money, but they reimbursed us.
Okay, well, I may be saying it wrong, but bye guys, it's really inexpensive money for us.
Careful.
No problem. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
But I will reiterate this at every board meeting, that bonds are really good for our pocketbooks because we can do the capital improvements we need and we can do it at a significant discount. So we talked about that, and then we said, what are the first steps to do? And Maureen explained that I guess we do a needs assessment and we engage an architect, and we came as a facilities committee, we wanted to recommend that we move forward because ideally, we would like, we'll be a little ambitious, is to have the vote 2 years from now, in the fall of 2019, because even then, it still takes time once you do that. So I think we decided we don't need a vote to move forward with an assessment, but if anybody has any negative reactions, feel free to say something. If not, then Maureen can go ahead and proceed.
Right, so I spoke to the architect, and they come in and, our architects, so Joe and I had started just an initial conversation with them, and they will, if the board wants to move forward with this, they will be coming in. But it's something we're required to do anyway. We need to always have a needs assessment that we submit to the state, and it's a working document to make sure that any of the, any issues that are going on in the building are identified, but they will come back and work with our facilities committee.
Right.
There's things that obviously we need their help in identifying, and then there's items that have to be done, like roofing, and then there's things that can be done, such as the middle school auditorium renovation and things like that. That would be more, although it probably needs some attention one way or the other. Those are more like want items as opposed to necessary. So.
And then the other part that we talked about with this is, projects that need to be done, that are not urgent, we would like to wait and put into the bond because we do it with cheap money, so.
I actually had the date as a bond vote, maybe October 2018, because they said at this point.
18?
Well, no, I'm sorry. She said, yes, she put together a timeline, which we'll start talking about,
Okay.
because they said right now the approval in the state, once you would even, it would take a year and a half to get approval, and then it's 6 months of bidding. So even if we were to have a bond vote next year, we wouldn't be doing work till 2020.
Right.
So I think
It's a long- there's a
some
long
of the
lag.
things too, if we're not able to do a bond vote, we would have to add some of those dollars back to the budget. So
And look, if we
you know,
could do a vote next year, make my day.
no, I mean, we'll start working with the architects. I'm just saying it, so they're going to put in a timeline just to give you different ideas, like if you were to vote here and then, obviously it's going to be some work before we get there. But.
Sure. No, and thank you for doing the reaching out on that. Okay, just trying to move us along.
Then we talked briefly about what some of the building projects would be for next summer. and we talked about the Burkefield seating and walkways.
Oh, right, and we needed to approve some funding to secure the new bleachers that are going in, which was fine.
And then the last two things we talked about was, we talked about solar and building usage by outside groups. My note says December, which may mean we...
I think we held off because somebody wasn't at our meeting.
Yeah,
I
so
think
that
we
one
couldn't,
okay.
right, okay. Okay, all right. Old business,
We don't have to talk about it.
I don't think we have, right,
Well,
the second read. Oh, so now we're going to vote on these?
These policies are ready to be voted on. These were ones that the first read, I guess, was Jean, was it at the last meeting?
No,
or
it was
2 meetings ago?
2 meetings ago.
2 meetings ago.
I believe.
That's one of them.
The thing I just sent you today, all I did was change the formatting, and there was a word like that I moved into another place. So it had absolutely nothing to do with the content. It was...
Okay, so the topics are public comment on board meetings, which, as I saw, was a very minimal. I couldn't even really tell what the change was. I mean, I saw a change, but it didn't seem to be adding anything. Child abuse, smoking, tobacco use, and student return to school after illness.
Yeah, the student return to school after illness is actually a new section to our sort of health. 5420 has, we had a whole bunch of separate policies. NISBA had one giant policy. What Wendy Nadich and I did when we sort of were swapping was we kept them as separate ones, but we made them 5420.1, 2, 3, and so on. We didn't have this .9 at all, so this is actually a new section, which was something that had come up last spring that Roy brought to us, that the principals felt they needed some language in there regarding kids returning to school.
Right. It was more around mental health issues and addressing.
Okay.
So so whereas the others are changes, that is really a new policy that we're inserting in there.
Okay, so now we approve those by motion, right? We need, okay, so may I have a motion? Well, let me ask you, does anybody do we want to treat the policies together? Oh, there's also a different internet safety one on here. I just didn't announce it, that's my bad. Does anybody want to pull any of the policies out? Okay, may I have a motion to approve all the policies listed under section 9? No, 8, sorry, 8. And a second? All in favor? Okay. And then the almost last thing is, Janine had written to me asking if we wanted to put a column in the Hastings Happening. It goes out by snail mail. And we all seemed a little overburdened, but I wrote something up. And I apologize. I think we're all just kind of doing this last minute, but I sent something out to you all. I don't know if you got to read it. I asked Janine to append it to here. We can discuss now, or if people haven't read it, we can assign 2 to 3 of us to finesse it, and everybody else will trust in what we've done. So I guess, does anybody who's read it?
If we have to have an exec session still, I suppose we don't.
Do you want to defer to 2 or 3 of us?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that plan then? Just defer to 2 or 3 of us to finalize this letter? Okay, so let me just so I wrote it. Who would like to take a crack at it? There's a draft already.
I had one particular thing, which I remember when I read through it, I thought we should handle a little differently, so I can email you about that.
Do you want to be one of the people then? Okay.
I can try to be.
Okay. Would anybody else like to? Doug, my man Doug, come on.
I'm happy to take a look. Yeah.
Or Tim, were you volunteering?
Yeah, I'm happy to be.
Okay, so you know what? Whichever of you has time has that. Okay. Actually, yeah, Don, well, okay, so we will do this done within the confines of the open meeting law. And Janine, we need to get it to you.
By Friday, ideally.
By December Friday.
By Friday.
Okay. So why don't you email your concern, and then I can toss it out to you guys, and we can finish it up.
So Lisa, should I just email you?
I think just email it to me, and then I can revise. And then send it.
Okay.
Second public comment, we have no more public. Board of Education comments? No, okay. All right, so now may I have a motion to move into executive session to discuss a personnel matter relating to a particular person as it relates to evaluative goals? And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay.